Hey there, my little monsters. So, unless you guys have been living underneath a rock somehow, I'm pretty sure you have heard about these things called labubus. And I'm pretty sure you also may have heard about this weird theory about how they're demonic little effigies. So I thought to myself, okay, what if the labubu is basically the baby version? And then, what would a full-grown version look like? So that's what I'm going to do here today. So if you guys haven't already, please subscribe so I'm able to do more of this stuff, because it's pretty fun. So what I'm going to do now is just basically doing a fundamental base layer and just sort of blocking out stage of, okay, these are the proportions I like, let's sort of move on from there. A really good way of building form fairly quickly is just using a myriad of subtools, just to sort of get the proportions of what you like, and then that's it when you begin to further work on them. So, a lot of the design philosophy for labubus in particular are, cute, rounded, big-headed things. Like, I'm not sure if you've seen it in other pop culture, but take, for example, Lilo and Stitch, other just little chibi mascot sort of things. That a giant head, big eyes, and a disproportionately small body are typically very good indicators for a fairly cute design. So I thought, okay, if I'm doing a sort of adult or a monstrous demonic form of one, let's flip that around and actually give it a giant body and a tiny creepy yellow head with creepy little eyes. Because that's actually a really good way of just conveying something's off. Like, how you convey size for a lot of sculptures in particular, and sort of just character designs, is the larger something is, it's easier to tell by the smaller of the head. Say, for example, like an average person, it consists of about like 6 to 8 heads, roughly, somewhere around that range. The larger the head, like density, though, that will sort of indicate more like hero proportions. Like, say Superman, I think he's like 8 to 9 heads worth for something like that, and that's to sort of show off a physically large, imposing frame. So when it comes to design, proportions like that are actually by far one of the most important features you should be taking into consideration, because they really can shift something from just being very sort of normal, mundane to otherworldly, freaky, and just bizarre. So whenever you're just playing around, even if you just get say a base human mesh and just start messing around with that, that would actually be a very good experiment just to see how well you can actually really morph something. So that actually leads into a bit of a discussion I want to have right now, and this is actually due with the sort of direction I want this channel and sort of content to be going into. So I want to be doing two forms of videos. One where I'm just talking about my design process and how I'm making something versus actual tutorials, because I've had some people say oh, I wish you would explain what you're doing a bit more versus okay, I'd rather actually just have more of a story of what you're doing. And I feel that's actually a good nature thing to have, a good in-between. Because there's only so many times I can actually describe, okay, yeah, I'm stretching this out, I'm repositioning this, and this. But, actually explaining why I'm doing something is actually a lot more important in my opinion. Because you're able to learn the technical skills from a lot of other places. But I feel the design philosophy, by anything, is actually a lot more of the important thing that you should be doing. And, especially when it comes to, the way I create. For example, a big reason why I did stretch out the legs and lower them as much as I did was to help build up the sort of juxtaposition between the sort of larval form of the labubu versus its sort of larger, more full-grown demon form. So it's actually just constantly trying to make the seem as if it's evolving and growing. Just the difference between a baby human and a full-grown adult. We have all the same elements, our head, arms, limbs, and all that sort of stuff, but the proportions for it, again, are just altered to such an extent that you're able to tell they're from the same entity, yet, you're able to tell, okay, yeah, no, this one is definitely a younger variation. So if you guys haven't, I'm pretty sure you've already noticed the giant mouth in its stomach and wondering why it's there. So that's actually part of the story I was giving myself for while I was creating this, because I thought to myself, okay, what if this doll is actually part of this giant scheme where they send these off to a bunch of children stuff where they start feeding on their positive energy at some point to actually allow them to increase in size to get to their full grown state, and after a certain while they can't feed on just energy anymore, so they have to fully devour it's a sort of adoptive host, if you will. And then they have to, okay, yeah, these energies aren't really doing a thing. Okay, let's just swallow you whole. And then they just go around and they just devouring things through there. So use their head mouth to just scope everything out, get a bite of something, see if it's actually worth fully consuming, and then just wah, in the giant old belly. Digestion tracts be damned. it goes into like this some otherworldly thing where it actually then sort of helps it like this potential labubu queen. Yeah, what's that, like laying all of these tiny little ones that are then being shipped out. Yeah, so like this is a really fun part of like a creature design process for me. Trying to come up with all these stories for why something would look the way that it does. And honestly, like visual storytelling is something I definitely need to work on a bit more. Because say for example, like I don't think many people would have like I wouldn't have been able to guess that unless I was told about it. So I need to be able to work on a way to actually convey all of these ideas a lot clearer through like visual storytelling means. Because it doesn't look like, oh yeah, that mouth is also like a portal to send off to a queen somewhere. Like that is something you need to be told. But in some cases, that is very hard to really be conveying just from like a giant belly mouth. So there are definitely like levels of understanding how something works to be able to get it to a point where it actually can be conveyed in such a way. What I do think is like a skill in itself that you always have to be able to like work on. Okay, now just to harper back for a second, I think it actually may be pretty fun to try and make a giant labubu queen at some point. Yeah, like combining elements from like insects and mammals, because I do think, a lot of what these creatures do give off is like very clearly mammal. So trying to think of like, okay, maybe if it did have like some insect-like qualities, because why not? It's a demon, and you're able to actually go kind of like out there for some of that. Because let's face it, for some like more supernatural designs, you're able to go in more like sort of like unconventional direction instead, because you aren't as grounded by the laws of reality. Yeah, so you're able to just do whatever you want, because it will be kind of boring and just less intimidating from a lot of design standpoints if you're always limiting yourself to like, oh yeah, no, this has to work in real world biology. Like sometimes you're allowed to just go completely hog wild. Like weirdly enough, the more rules you give yourself, the more you confine yourself. What can be a hindrance to some extent. Like say for example, I was to design a sort of like Lovecraftian, like eldritch god of like Chinese buffets, and like I did something was just like a normal creature that would exist in our world. Yeah, but like that wouldn't really fit the tone of it, because like if it's the more limited something is in like the scope of the design there, the more it actually hinders itself, because it actually can't be this sort of like truly cosmic horror sort of entity that it's meant to be. Also, if you want to see me make that at some point, let me say that may actually be kind of funny to do. Sorry about that. I'm really bad for going on tangents. But yeah, going back to like depending on like what you're designing and what for, like that's how you should really like take a idea of how much inspiration from the real world you're taking versus how much of it is just like purely imaginary and how much it doesn't actually need to like be able to function in a true sense. Like for example, I was speaking to someone the other day, and we were talking about like designing fantasy creatures and such, and they said a really good thing to sort of like have in mind is have 70% like a real world inspiration and then 30% like all imagined. And that's a really good way to have like very grounded designs. But then if you want to say go for like more abstract things, go with sort of the inverse, 70% imagined and then 30% and inspired by real life. And it should be like this constant balancing act of like trying to assess what narrative you're trying to push with said design and then going from there. I hope that made sense to all of you. Also, I know I said I didn't really want to go to talking about the sculpt too much, but good God, hair is an absolute nightmare. Like, God damn, this is why I don't like doing it. Like, I just prefer scales and just other simpler things, because hair is so hard for like the amount of layering and sort of texturing for it. Good God. But to anyone who's able to like actually sculpt hair on a regular basis with ease, like I am envious of you and I want to steal your talent. I want you to know that. Like, hey, I may actually just do a video where I try to teach myself how to properly sculpt hair and fur, because a lot of ways how people normally do it are just via alphas, and I'm not gonna lie, on Nomad, like alphas I don't find too helpful for like us or hair stamps, especially for like let's say the nature of how I sculpt. So I definitely need to work on like finding a good way to do sort of like more stylized hair where it actually like works in a well enough manner. Like I would be happy to like 3D print it, because for example, how I want to work and sort of what I want to go into for myself is to go more into sort of like model making of like say 3D miniatures for like tabletop gamings. So I need to find a good way to sort of be able to like sculpt hair that would actually work really well for painters. I guess a good way to do that actually would probably be looking into stuff like Warhammer and just other like popular miniatures for tabletop, because they clearly have a good idea of what I'm doing, And that's just a generally good tip in general. If you want to learn something, look at someone who's able to do something really well and then learn via them. So, yeah. Here is my fully grown monster labubu. And if you guys happen to like the video and liked what I was talking about, yeah, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Yeah, just because I really do like doing this, and I need to get better at like actually being consistent with long form content. Because it is a nightmare to do. Like recording all this sort of stuff is a lot like weirder than what I'm used to, but guess what? I'll get more and more used to it the more I do it. So yeah, stay tuned for that, and tell me what you'd like to see next. I'll try to get to it if I can. So yeah, have a lovely day, guys, and yeah, please subscribe. Good lord, I just realized how many times I said yeah. Anyway, yeah. Bye.